Welcome to another edition of Kop Talk. Larry Levin here with Bob Cohn and our producer Mike Sherwin. And we now have news, 7 minutes new, that a pope has been chosen. Cardinal Jorge Maria Bergoglio, Archbishop of Buenos Aires, will be known as Pope Francis. He has a strong social justice bent, though he distanced himself early on from true liberation theology. What do we look for in Catholic-Jewish relations as a result of this this announcement of a new pope?
Knowing relatively little about him except for the immediate press releases from the Vatican, I think he will build upon the very positive legacy left, especially by his predecessor before Benedict XVI, John Paul II, and before that even John the 23rd, who reached out in a very positive way to improve Catholic-Jewish relations, establishing diplomatic relations with Israel. And in fairness to Pope Benedict, now Emeritus the 16th, he also established full diplomatic relations between the Holy See, the Vatican, and the State of Israel, visited the State of Israel, as did Pope John Paul II. And I'm expecting that the new, relatively young Pope at 76 will follow in the shoes of the fishermen, as they say.
Does the fact that he hails from Argentina make a difference as far as in matters relating to Israel?
Well, it really, there's a current issue that you and I were discussing earlier this week about the fact that Argentina has dropped any kind of official investigation into the bombing of the Jewish Community Center there a number of years back, which had the fingerprints of the Iranian regime, and they're entering into some joint ventures and trading partnerships with the Iranian regime. And the foreign minister of Argentina, who happens to be Jewish, his name is Timmerman, was rebuked on the floor of the Parliament. So that will be an interesting, whether he'll get that much into the nitty-gritty of a current issue, I don't know.
Let's stay with Latin America for a minute and the death of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. Obviously, there's been a lot of anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli sentiment emanating from Chavez, his administration, and the country generally, as Chavez had kind of an axis with some of the terror organizations in the Middle East. What effect of Chavez's death?
It will have a huge effect because the man whose views we disagreed with vehemently, especially as regards Israel and the Jewish community, had tremendous charisma and was deploying it very effectively. His successor is a relatively unknown gray eminence who doesn't nearly have his panache as a former tank commander. So I think it's a big setback for radical anti-Israel forces in Latin America.
In a column in the Times this week, a Haaretz columnist, a guy named Ari Shavit, suggests the so-called old peace ideas in the Middle East based on the Oslo Accords are really dead. And he cites the Second Intifada, the Hamas elections in Gaza in 2006, and the Arab Spring all contributing, and there being no Palestinian partner with whom to make peace right now. But he suggests that a new peace based on economic arrangements between Israel and its neighbors, creating revenue streams for all, including the Palestinians, and Israel getting its own financial house in order might be a more constructive and useful path. What are your thoughts?
I was impressed with that piece, particularly in a newspaper that generally takes a more pro-peace negotiation stance, to have that type of approach, to gradually let the situation stabilize and then maybe quietly and incrementally evolve into a peaceful arrangement based upon kind of a Benelux confederation between Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and Jordan. And I have another idea that President Obama is about to visit Israel for the first time as president next week. Why not simply take up Abbas and say, look, you're now recognized by the United Nations as a non-member state. We're proposing that we will recognize you as a state, full member of the United Nations, and let's just negotiate the borders. You would have then locked in place a two-state solution, and then just as Israel negotiated borders with Egypt and with Jordan and tried to with Syria, I think that might be a way of untying the Gordian knot. It's staring us right in the face.
Well, I have a couple questions about that, and the trip was something I was going to ask you about. So first of all, what you're suggesting is that basically Gaza and Hamas just be cut out of the equation in discussions?
Well, no. The United Nations resolution was with the understanding that the Palestinian Authority, which was recognized in the Oslo Accords and the Declaration of Principles, it says nothing about Hamas whatsoever. It talks about the Palestine Liberation Organization, the umbrella organization that includes Fatah, and it does not. So
Well, I know, but Israel ceded, the Gaza in 2006 and said, elect whoever you want.
Yes.
And they elected Hamas.
They did.
So how did they turn around and basically take a stance with Abbas when Abbas doesn't really have, perceived authority in the Palestinian world over Gaza?
Well, there are some elements within Hamas who would be willing to accept prior understandings that were reached between Fatah, between Abbas and the State of Israel previously. I know it's a long shot, but there have been a few efforts to reconcile, to make Hamas a member of the PLO, and thus bring it under the umbrella of the peace process.
As aspirational as your idea is, here's why I don't think it will happen, because Obama still has incredibly low standing amongst the Israeli people in almost every poll. And I think for him to be perceived as cutting any sort of deal at this point with Abbas, even if behind in back channels he has the imprimatur of Bibi or whomever, I think still could cause a very strong anti-PR uprising against Obama and the Americans.
And I don't really see that happening on the trip. They're talking about the trip being a listening tour, but I can see it happening 6 or 8 months down the road with John Kerry, who's shown great skill as the new Secretary of State, leading the way.
Yeah, I think so, and I think you let maybe some of the potential for goodwill with Obama percolate for a while.
Exactly.
Then maybe you have something that can happen. And of course it couldn't happen now because we're kind of in a lame duck tweener stage with the Israeli government. And not till Monday are we going to see a new government. At least we think we're going to see a new government now. It looks like 68 out of 120 are forming a government. Bibi and his party got Yesh Atid and the Jewish Home Party and Hatnua, which is Tzipi Livni's new party, to participate. And we have some ultra-Orthodox parties for the first time in an awfully long time on the outside looking in. What does it all mean for Israel?
First of all, I'm delighted that Tzipi Livni has joined the new coalition with the understanding that she would be the main point person on the peace process with the Palestinians, albeit under the aegis of Bibi Netanyahu. The fact that the Orthodox are left out of the equation, there are many lovers of Israel who feel that the threat of ultra-Orthodox domination of Israeli politics and society is a greater internal threat than the combined external threat from hostile elements, including Iran, because the very nature of the Jewish state, founded on Zionist pluralistic principles, is constantly under siege with the advent of the Haredi movement.
Well, and it looks like with this majority, with the coalition, looks like they can go ahead and enact their laws pertaining to military conscription, and no matter how loudly the religious right argues, they're not going to win on that particular issue.
And I hope they lose, frankly, on that particular issue.
Because? For
the sake of the integrity of all Jews, it is a Jewish state. It is not an Orthodox Jewish state. The Western Wall is not a synagogue. Mm-hmm. It is the outer retaining wall of the Second Temple. And Sharansky is now trying to accommodate different ways of approaching the Western Wall in prayer.
And speaking of religious locations, we wrote this week an editorial about Hamas's efforts to try and prevent or boycott on behalf of the Muslim world visiting Jerusalem. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I appreciated your editorial on that particular matter. I quite honestly was not all that familiar that Hamas had taken that position. I mean, Israel, they very easily could have torn down the Al-Aqsa Mosque and erected a third temple. But Moshe Dayan decided let each individual religious group handle their various religious shrines, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, and to encourage people to stay away from the eternal city of Jerusalem, which is holy to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. You noted in your editorial that the Muslims believe that Muhammad ascended to heaven on a steer, from Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. It's mentioned 600 times in our Bible. Mm-hmm. It's mentioned numerous. It was the place where Jesus preached much of his gospel.
And when Hamas or very what I'd call reactionary clerics try to take that position, what it does is try to sever relations between faiths, which to me is a very dangerous proposition.
Especially in this day and age.
What else are you thinking about this week?
Well, I'm thinking about the movie called The Gatekeepers we were discussing, and how it relates to the debate in this country over the use of drones in targeted killings, the use of enhanced interrogation techniques. 6 former directors of the Shin Bet, not the Mossad, it's more like the FBI than the CIA, have expressed grave personal guilt feelings, frankly, and concerns. They felt they did what they had to do in ordering targeted assassinations in Israel and in the territories, but it left them with a lot of qualms. And I think that it's part and parcel of the debate we're having in this country over drone strikes, as well as within the state of Israel. It was an Oscar-nominated movie that should hit the theaters fairly soon. It's reviewed in this issue of The Light.
You know, one thing that we talk about here, and I think is fascinating, is how new technology and new science and their implementation always seem to go ahead by years of ascertaining what the right moral and ethical standard is by which to apply those. You know, we've seen issues on electronic dissemination of electronic information, and with the WikiLeaks.
Yes.
And how do you treat the legal implications of that? We've seen the targeted assassination of al-Awlaki in Yemen.
Yes, an American
United
citizen.
States citizen. And how do you deal with that? Oftentimes, we go ahead and do things with our technological discoveries in might before we've had the opportunity to reflect back and say what's right, what's not. And this is true throughout history.
Absolutely.
That we assess, you know, new technology and its proper place in society after we've already utilized it.
And miraculously, and thank God, we did rein in atomic weaponry. It's only been used twice, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and not since. But these drones can be miniaturized. I heard something on NPR called Frankenstein's Cat, where they can make a drone the size of a wasp, and they can eavesdrop on conversations, and they can be used for lethal purposes.
Oh, absolutely. Google just got slapped because their Google vans that have done GPS analysis and research have driven by areas and ensnared encrypted passwords and other private information.
Yeah.
So we see it all over.
Exactly.
And we're trying to figure out how to deal with it as advanced societies. Thank you for your thoughts, as always. Thank Mike, our producer, and we'll see you next time on Kop Talk. Take care.
Thank you.